Welcome to our webinar today. We are talking today about why is marketing so expensive? So something as people think about for their own organization, accounting firm, and then also for clients. Hopefully you'll get some really good tips of the importance and kind of putting expensive into context for what people think is what they should see. So a little bit of introduction. My name is Tom Wadelton. I'm a virtual CFO at Summit CFO by Anders. That means I've got about 17 clients that I do financial consulting with and play the capacity of CFO for these companies in the kind of $3 to $5 million revenue range. Our presenter today is Matt Banker, and Matt is the founder of Banker Creative. And Matt, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I have a background in not accounting or anything like that. I have a background in fine arts and have found myself in marketing. And we just found that we really loved working with accounting firms. And so in the last few years, we've really focused in on that as a niche. And I take a words first approach to marketing. We really believe that messaging and understanding who you are, how you approach the market, and the words that you use is really one of the most important things. And so that's where I come from. I'll surface the fact that I am a marketer. I'm a marketing agency owner, and we're going to talk about why it's so expensive to do marketing. It's a little self-serving here, sure. But I hope to be able to bring a fairly non-biased perspective to this topic.
Good. Well, welcome. I will reflect, looking at the pictures, it would be pretty easy to pick that one of those guys is an accountant, the other one who's more fashionably dressed, things might be more marketing, fine arts kind of background. So the pictures don't lie in this case.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got some housekeeping to get through. So today it's a 1 hour CPE credit. So for people, we will have 3 polling questions. You do need to answer all 3 of those questions. I probably will not comment when they come up. They'll pop up on your screen to answer. If you want to interact with us today, people are on mute, but we do have the question function, and I'll be monitoring that and either answering them via type if that's appropriate, or where I can, I'll interrupt Matt and say, hey, this really applies to what you're saying now. So that's by far the best way. If something he says piques your interest, you want to make a comment on it, or just want to ask, hey, you mentioned this, tell me more about that, we will get that answered. So we will send out CPE certificates for the people who earn that. And then also we get a lot of questions around, were there handouts, and did you send us a copy of the slides, or can I get those? So you can see here, we didn't get anything in advance, but we will send out, there's replay available, and then we will also send out slides to people. I mentioned that I work for the CFO division of Anders, so let me just tell you a little bit about our organization. So back in 2002, our 2 founders started Summit CPA Group as a traditional accounting firm. Starting in 2004, though, we started offering back office accounting and CFO services to people. That was for a long time. Starting in 2013, there were 2 things. The ones mentioned here, we went to a fully distributed firm. So don't have an office, gave us lots of flexibility for employees and clients. The other big change at that time was we really focused on the virtual CFO as the main service that we provide. Last year, we joined Anders, CPA Advisors. Anders is a St. Louis-based top 100 firm. We joined them, and as of today, actually, the very beginning of June, we are now the Summit Virtual CFO by Anders. So that is a new brand that we have, and we offer that service and are really excited to be with them. So Matt, I guess the big question that we're talking about today, why is marketing so expensive? You've got a great title, maybe you can tell us that, and I'm hoping framing so expensive doesn't mean too expensive.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I break it down really into 2 parts. One is that marketing feels expensive, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I think that a lot of firm owners don't necessarily understand marketing. They don't really have a frame of reference for the cost, and they haven't budgeted properly. The problem with that is, if you don't know enough about marketing and you don't have that baseline, any amount of money that you put into it feels expensive. Most firm owners, they start with basically a gut level, like, oh, I think I should spend this much on marketing, or it should cost this much. And so when they write that check, it feels really expensive. And so the mental and the mindset side of things are really important. And I think when you've budgeted properly, and you have in your pricing and in the way that you think about your services, if that's part of the system you have set up, it, that money just flows into marketing automatically. It doesn't feel like it's taken away from your bottom line. It's part of the investment. So that's a mindset and a planning issue. Now, the other side of things is marketing is expensive as well. Some of these things are changing a little bit with some of the AI work, but it is a labor intensive thing to do. It's very difficult to find a plug and play way to do marketing that's effective for your firm. And so it takes people and it's brain power intensive. I think for accounting firms, the most value that you bring to your clients is in your advisory role as the guide. And there's a lot of that happens in marketing as well. It's not something, again, it's kind of that plug and play thing. You can't fully outsource the brain power that it takes to do the marketing well. You really need to think through it. And so it takes that strategy piece. And then the last thing is there's a lot of tech that's involved in marketing, whether it's Google or Facebook or LinkedIn or software, HubSpot, all these different platforms, they're pretty good at getting their cut of what it takes to do marketing. And so you don't just pay for a person to do the marketing. You've got that tech spend as well.
Okay.
So, the last thing I'll say is buyer behaviors change. So some of the things that you've done in the past that were effective may not work in the same way as they did before. And so you need to adapt, and then all these other things come back into play again. And so you gotta keep up with the market. Lastly, your firm is not the same as every other firm. And so again, these plug and play solutions aren't always going to work for you.
So we had the poll question. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you what people said about this. Let me go ahead and share the results that you should be able to see.
Yeah.
So it looks like we've got about 50% in those two questions that say no, either we don't spend enough or it's a good investment. And then 38% saying yes, it's expensive. So a fairly even split, right? 8 people versus 6 people that are in there.
Yeah, that's not atypical. I think a lot of the firm owners I talk to, those first 2 questions, yes, it's too expensive. That's an objection. That's a hard thing for people to get over. Again, I'd say that a lot of that comes back to, budgeting properly for it. And then we don't spend enough. And that often is because you're in other priorities mode, right? You got to do the marketing, but there's other stuff to work on first. And you haven't gotten around to spending what you need on marketing. I like to think about marketing as an engine. It needs to get started up, and it needs to be warm, and it needs to be running. It's not a light switch, so it's more like a diesel, right? You gotta get it up and going, and it has to be. It works better when it's been running than if you just try to flip a switch. And so there's a few different things that go into this. This is just an overview. I'm not going to go super deep into the details of this, but you have to have a good foundation of your brand. You need to be producing things usually on a weekly basis. You need to be active in distributing that content in different places. And then you have to be able to capture whatever demand is created through all of your marketing efforts. And so all those pieces are part of a marketing engine. This is an example of some of the things you might do in those different phases. If you're creating articles and videos and podcasts, and you're posting on social media, you're running local SEO or paid search campaigns, all of those sorts of things are part of a marketing engine. There's a fuzzy line between marketing and sales. I don't draw a super strong distinction between them, but most companies do need to have a marketing and a sales function. Sometimes those are combined in one person, but when it comes to budgeting and thinking about how you allocate your resources, they're not exactly the same. You can't expect everything. The activities that a good outbound salesperson does are not going to be necessarily all the same activities that a good marketing person does. And in a lot of cases, go ahead, Tom.
Sorry to interrupt. I like that you say that it could be the same person, knowing that we've got some small firms on the line. And our firm subscribes to the EOS methodology. One of the things is an org chart. But early on, you can have the same person's name in a bunch of things to say, I am the sales guys in marketing. But understanding that difference also lets you know if I get to a certain size, that's when you split off and say it's a different person. But at least understanding what fits in each of those roles, I think is a really important thing to understand.
Yeah. And we're talking about revenue generation, right? And my perspective is if you have something that works, then do that. If you've got a killer salesperson who is able to self-generate the leads that you need, and they do that through their network and through other, more traditional sales methods, that's great. You don't necessarily need a marketing, as much of a marketing budget. But if that's not working for you, if you're not generating the revenue that you want, and you don't have that salesperson, marketing is definitely one of the options that are available to you. And we'll get into this later. Some firms grow through acquisition. That's their strategy. Rather than investing in marketing, they look to buy other firms, and that's going to be how they grow. And that is another option. Today, I'm really going to be talking about what is, if you're choosing to grow through marketing, what do you have to do? Where do those costs come in? So, all right, let's talk about this. You can pay with time or money. And so when I say marketing is expensive, I do mean that, but I don't mean you have to pay a marketing agency. A lot of small firms will pay in time, whether that's the owner or they allocate the work to someone on their team, and they put in the energy and the effort in-house. And so the trade-off, though, is what you can't do is you can't be cheap on time and expect that you're going to get good results for your marketing. And so if you are going to go that route, it is still, I still say it's expensive because it does take that effort and that work to do it. So you're going to have to pay one way or the other. And so I like to say that there are three main ways that you need to pay for marketing. And so the first one is you need good ideas. You need strategy that is going to work. And this goes back to, not every firm is exactly the same. The services you offer, how you're positioned, if you're in a niche or if you're a generalist firm, depending on your market, there's a lot of things that can come into play. And certain marketing tactics will be really effective for you and others won't, but someone needs to figure out what you're going to do and where you're going to put your money. If you go out there and search for marketing, like marketing advice, there are hundreds, thousands of things that you could be doing and ways that you could be spending your money. And so when I say you have to pay for ideas, someone needs to figure out what you're going to do. Two, you have to pay for the labor or just the work that it takes to do stuff, whether that's designing or writing or setting up or managing or optimizing, all of those things. It takes time and someone's got to do that work. And then third, you have to pay for a platform. And that also, distribution is another way to say that. So whether that's if you're posting organically on social media or paying Google to get ads out there, or advertising on a podcast, all of these things, it's the distribution of your marketing materials and efforts that you have to pay someone for. A lot of times that's, the tech company or the platform in some way.
And would you say, is there balance across these, or would you tend to say, no, the idea is a certain early stage where you really put in a lot of effort and then you start doing the labor in the platform, or how does someone think about that?
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a bit, but the strategy definitely is the first thing. And this is the one that a lot of folks, they make a mistake by not investing in strategy. And my perspective is really the way that marketing is most expensive is when you only invest in 2 out of the 3 of these categories, right? So you're going to pay for pieces of it, but it's not going to give you the ROI that you want because you haven't actually invested adequately in all 3 buckets. Okay. So let's start with strategy. Again, there are 100 ways to spend a marketing budget. And so someone's got to help you figure out the best ROI. And just going back to this, I believe time or money. Firm owners They're smart people. You're entrepreneurial. You've grown to this point probably through, your own grit and tenacity and sharp approach to the market. And so you could be the strategist for your firm. But the strategist needs to be able to see the big picture. They need to understand the goal. They need to be able to diagnose problems and pay attention to the cost of acquisition. I jumped ahead a little bit. Be able to be, and they should be measured on revenue. Really, at the end of the day, the strategist, that person is thinking, is this working? Do we have actual leads that are turning into sales on the other end? Someone in the middle in that labor role, they might be focused on things like clicks and likes and views and those sorts of things that tell us, if the marketing assets are working. But the strategist really needs to pay attention to say, okay, hey, we got a lot of people to open that email, and we've been doing, or we've built an email list over 6 months, but none of it has turned into any clients. It's the strategist's job to say, okay, why not? Are we doing the wrong stuff? Is there something wrong with what it is we're creating? The quality isn't good. We have a wrong approach to the market. That's all the strategists. And so they're sitting there thinking in the big picture and trying to figure out what's the best way to allocate our resources that are going to give us good ROI. I like this. It's a map that I've kind of created that helps us understand what we're trying to do with marketing. And I like to think about it. You're trying to cross this chasm or this river, trying to get your prospect to move from one side all the way over to the other to the sale. And in order to get there, there's some things that you can do. These are all kind of marketing activities and things that you can pull on. And this could be its own webinar, just talking about this map. But the main thing to remember that I think is really important is that you have demand capture activities and demand generation activities. And so in the middle, you've got this thing called Awareness Island. That's what I call it, which is there are some people who know they need your services and they're just trying to find the right fit. That if that is the prospect, they've already landed on Awareness Island and they're out there searching Google. That's at the top with search, or they're going through what we call dark social, which is their network. The only reason we call it dark is it's dark to us as marketers. It's hard to find attribution data. We can't go into a private Slack channel and search, see how many times our name was mentioned. We can't, go to that every conference and find out who is recommending us to their friends. So we're in the dark. But people are looking for a service and they're trying to find you in a couple ways, and you need to do the work to make sure you can capture whatever demand is already in the market. And so a lot of that has to do with your website, and making sure we use a couple of frameworks to help convert people into that sale if they're already in market looking for your service. The other big piece of marketing is creating demand, which is it has to do with the fact that most of your ideal customers don't know they have a problem or don't feel enough pain to be looking for a solution yet. And for those prospects, your job is to help educate them. You want to be known, liked, and trusted by your target audience before they're in the market. And then if you can do that, the way they get to Awareness Island is through you. You help them understand the pain that you can solve and the problems that they have. And when you do that, they're never going to go to Google search. They're never going to go to their network. They're just going to go directly to your website because you've already built that relationship with them. So there's two ways to pay for strategy: with time or with money. And so if you're going to spend time, they're good books. You can listen to podcasts. You can develop your own marketing strategy. I think this is really a valuable way for smaller firms or ones who can't allocate the budget to hire an agency or a consultant to do that. The other thing is you can spend money. You can hire someone in-house. You can hire an agency, or you can hire a freelancer to be your strategist. Now, one thing I'll say here, a consultant who has an agency owner or a strategist at an agency, they want to help you win. That's true. But they also have this other it's attention. They want to sell you services. They want to sell you the services that their company happens to provide. And so one of the things that is often beneficial for people is to hire or to find someone who can act as that strategist, if you're going to go that route, who doesn't have that same level of kind of split priorities, who can tell you, yeah, you should really do A, B, C and not X, Y, Z. And they don't have to say, it's not based on what services they provide. They're just guiding you in the right direction. And so that's a lot of times folks think you just have to hire a big expensive agency, and there's advantages to that at times, but sometimes what you need is an individual freelancer who has a good understanding of your market. Now, I feel that tension myself with my clients. I always try to be in kind of a fiduciary role where I'm trying to give the best advice, not just the advice that fits me and my company, but there's a real tension there when you're hiring an agency for them to push whatever services they happen to offer on you.
So if you're looking for someone like that, Matt, are you asking people, do you provide these services, or how do you kind of filter out if I'm buying your premise that, okay, it does make sense not to hire the hammer who's going to come in and of course say, well, it's the hammer that you need.
Right. What the main thing I would say is if you want someone who's going to take the time to understand what makes your company unique and make sure that they understand how you might be different from other firms other types of companies. We found certain strategies work great for accounting firms because it's a business. A lot of my clients are in kind of the B2B space. They're looking for those monthly clients, not annual tax clients. They often are focused on a geographic area. And those tactics are very different than if you were selling widgets on Instagram. And so if you talk to someone and they just launch into how their service is going to solve your problems before they spend the time figuring out a lot about what your company and what your firm is like, that to me is an indicator that they're really thinking more from just a sales perspective rather than from a strategic perspective. And I would put them in that middle section, that labor middle bucket. If they're just there to execute on a strategy that's already there, that might be fine, but you want to make sure you've already vetted that person to know that that's the strategy you need, rather than just trusting that they have your best interest.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So the second thing you pay for is labor. It takes a couple people a lot of time, or a lot of people a little time. And so agencies are more in a lot of people a little time, because they tend to have a lot of the capacity to do this marketing activity, but they may not be spending as many hours. Whereas if you have someone in-house who's doing your marketing, it might take them longer. They don't have as many of the skills, but that's the other way that you do it. So what needs to be done? It's kind of a long list of all the sorts of things that, again, it's going to depend on your strategy, but the types of things that you're going to need to do. You have to write creative briefs. You have to do design. You have to research things. You have to check the quality. You have to do reporting. You have to optimize. There's project management. There's all that kind of stuff. There's just, and that's just a partial list. It's just that there's just stuff to be done. And that's the reality. And what I found is that, usually a person has a few skills. Let's say a marketing person has maybe 3 out of the 12 skills that are required to do their role well. You have some people who have a great sense of design, but they're not very good writers. Or maybe they're a great writer and designer, but they don't understand analytics. They're not good with the reporting or the technical side of things. And so you generally need to cobble together a bit of a team to hit these different areas. The ways you can pay for labor, it's very similar. You can do the work yourself. I know a lot of firm owners who love to write their emails or are active on social media, and that their personal brand is a big part of how they build their business. That's you doing the labor. That's you spending the time to get it out there. Others will assign someone on their team essentially to do that for them. And then the other thing is you can hire someone. You throw money at it, but you hire a marketer for your team, you hire an agency, you hire a contractor. All All right, the last section is distribution. You have to get things out there into the world, and that usually means it's you send emails, you publish podcasts, you post on social media, all those sorts of things. You do like search and SEO. You're trying to get found on Google. You, like I said, podcasts, YouTube, in-person events. These are all the things where you've done the work. Now you need to get it out to the masses. You pay for time, you pay in time, or you pay in money. You can pay in time by posting regularly. This is kind of an organic approach to distribution. You build your own audience. It's this personal branding. You start that podcast, you put it out in the world, you go on other people's podcasts, you seek out earned media, things you don't have to pay for, but it takes either like networking and relationship building, and you have to develop that credibility as a thought leader in the space. Or you can start paying the platforms directly. You can use paid search, Google search, for example, or paid social media. I like to give I like LinkedIn a lot for a lot of especially B2B accounting firms. You can really target on your ideal customer based on their industry, their job title, the size of their business, the headcount, all those things. And you kind of guarantee distribution of your content to that target market. Podcasts and podcast ads can be another way, even paid traditional media, radio. I'm not a huge fan of billboards, but if you've got a great deal and you're in a small community, something like that even could be a possibility.
Matt, if we can pause on that for a second on that topic, we've got a couple questions.
Yeah.
So can you provide some specific marketing channels or tactics that tend to be particularly costly? So maybe of this list or other things you want to talk about, kind of which ones tend to cost more?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you some of the ones I'm a little more negative on these days. We all have been hearing a lot about AI and ChatGPT, and SEO for the longest time has been a big way that people they center their marketing around an SEO focused approach. What that means is you're creating content to show up in search engines. And what I found is if you're just starting out, there's a couple challenges with SEO and reason for it to be expensive. One is it takes a long time to work. It's not a light switch. You got to build that up over time. And two, it's a very competitive space. It's kind of a mature marketing channel at this point. So a lot of people have been investing in SEO for a really long time and still are. And so if you're starting from zero, it can be something that takes a long time and takes a lot of investment before you see any ROI. And so I'm a little bit skeptical about that. And related to that with the AI discussion is we now have an ability to churn out what I would call low quality content at high volumes. And so I don't know for sure what's going to happen, but it's not a tactic that I'm terribly bullish on right now as starting from scratch. There's some other things that I would usually do first. So I think SEO can be very expensive. Now I differentiate that sort of article-based keyword SEO from local SEO, which is focused on showing up in your specific geography. And there's some different tactics there. I actually think local SEO has a really great ROI for most firms. But the keyword side of things, it takes a long time. The other thing that I would say, I think the main thing is it gets expensive when you start doing tactics that are about generating demand. When we talk about that slide where you're trying to create a lot of content or be really active on social media, and you haven't done the stuff that's going to capture that demand and turn them into customers. If you don't do it in the right order, you can spend a lot of time, what I would say, sending good traffic to a bad website. That can be a really expensive way to spend on marketing. So if you're sending a lot of Google ads traffic to your website, but you haven't built your brand foundations, or you're not well positioned, you don't have your messaging in order, all of those things can make it really expensive as well.
Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, let me get another question in then. So then how has the evolution of technology impacted the expenses involved in marketing efforts?
Well, I think it's similar as with the accounting industry. I don't think that when we say technology, I'm just going to hit on the topic of the day, which is kind of AI tools. These tools can make people really efficient, but they can't replace copywriters and marketers. And so the way it's affected it is that the folks that are really talented and really know what they're doing, they're able to do more faster, better than they ever were before. And it's also given people who are, it's probably a little pejorative, but hacks, we'll say marketing hacks, also the ability to crank out stuff at high volumes, but it doesn't necessarily work really well. The other way, though, that I think technology has impacted marketing is there's you can't replace strategy with technology. You have to have your processes and you have to have a good strategy in place before you start investing in technology. You can't think, oh, I'm just going to go. I think a great example is HubSpot is a great tool. It's best in class for CRM and marketing activities. But the thing I see over and over again is firms will invest in HubSpot, but they won't invest in the person to run their HubSpot. And so they pay, $800, $1,200 a month for this platform that's supposed to make them into a great marketing engine, but there's no one there to run it. And they're just not getting any real, they're not getting the ROI out of it. And so you have to be careful when you invest in technology to make sure that you have the capacity to use it effectively. Otherwise, it's a really expensive investment.
Okay, excellent.
So if you don't invest in one of those three areas, I kind of mentioned this earlier, it's gonna be more expensive as well. So if you don't have good strategy, you could be spinning your wheels, you could be doing a lot of stuff, but you're not getting the results that you want. So it's basically, if you can run really fast in the wrong direction, right? And that is not helping you reach your goal. And so that's kind of what it is. When you don't have good strategy, you can run in the wrong direction. The other way is when you've got, here's my list. You do the wrong stuff. You stick with things too long. You abandon something too soon. Now that's a tension to have, right? Yeah. Sticking with something long enough to see the results and abandoning it before you see the results. Both of those can be challenges. And I won't pretend to say that is an easy question to answer all the time, but you do want to be thinking about that. You can fail to recognize opportunities and not address weaknesses. Those are all strategy problems. I've had some clients, I'm an ideas guy. I love working with people. And so some of my clients, I'm just in a consulting role where they have a team or they're going to do it themselves. They just want me to help with the strategy. And we see this hole where they spend on the strategy. They hire me to come in and give them strategy. And then they don't actually create the stuff to do the marketing. And so we spend a lot of time coming up with great campaigns, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't get out. This is really just in this case, that's a strategy only solution. They haven't invested in getting it out into the world in either of those other two buckets. That's a real problem. You could get bad design, poor performing content, missed deadlines, broken funnels, inconsistency, all of those sorts of things are real problems. And this is also when you could invest in labor, but you could invest in really cheap labor. I've seen a lot of folks who go and they hire the least expensive web design company that they could find, right? And that ends up, they have a website, but it's not a good website, or they don't get their messaging right. They underinvest in the quality in the labor area, in the creative development side of things.
That sounds like that could be somewhat your example of someone writing blog posts like with a chat GPT, that if you look back, you would say, do you really want to put out a blog every single day that's just mediocre?
Right.
Or would you rather put out something that really grabs people's attention, and less is probably better? So your low labor, I assume, is in a similar kind of a category.
Yes, for sure. So, and the last one is if you have no distribution, it looks great. You have great ideas. No one ever sees them. You're like a hidden company, a secret company that is doing great work, but nobody knows about you. And I think that one's pretty obvious. So the stakes. Okay. I mentioned this. Marketing gets expensive when you're missing one of these pieces. I'll even grab from the chat here. I see a question where there was a question about, are there hidden costs or overlooked expenses that businesses should be aware of? To me, this is one of the biggest ones when I'd rather you spend no money on marketing than spend a lot of money, but not enough in the right places. I think that's a huge hidden cost, is when you don't follow through and have a full marketing strategy. That's a huge cost of marketing that you could be missing. The other thing is, many companies, they make the mistake of doubling down in one category, something they've already committed to, or their marketing partner says, yeah, the reason your ads aren't working is just because you're not spending enough money. That can be, again, I tend to harp really on the strategy piece of things a lot, because I think so many of these problems with marketing can be answered or solved when you have a good strategy behind it. So let's talk about some real budgeting cost things. You get what you pay for, because it's not. Now this is, again, we're not a cheap marketing agency. We want to be a premium service provider. And the other marketing agencies out there that I think do great work and get great results, they're also charging what they're worth. I think marketing and accounting, they're fairly similar fields. There's an advisory portion of it. There can be kind of a strategic side of things. And I want my clients to be raising their rates. I want my marketing that I'm doing for them to allow them to charge more. But part of that is, we also, as a company, want to be a premium brand. And so there's always going to be sticker shock, I think, when people start working with a good agency. But I think that the return on investment you have a better chance of getting that good return if you're working with someone who really knows what they're doing. So cheaper is not always better. I think we all know that. If you think about your own business, I'm sure you would make the same argument, to your clients, is that you don't want the cheapest accountant in the world. I always use this example of, I know this great back surgeon. He's super cheap, right? It's not gonna be a good sales pitch there. Yeah. So here's some. These are really ballpark figures, just to give you a sense. If you're working with like a freelance contractor, just a solo person, they might be charging $50 to $100 an hour. A lot of the best ones don't charge hourly, but that'll give you kind of a range of what they might be expecting. If you have them do a website, $5,000 to $10K for a website would be good. Monthly marketing, in that $500 to $5K range. If you jump up to an agency, they've got a bigger team, more capacity, capabilities, the rates are going to be a bit higher. Everything that they do is going to be a bit more expensive, and you're going to need to. They have more overhead. It's just kind of the basics of business. So better, more experience, higher quality, more overhead that contributes to their costs. The other thing, I think everyone's familiar with fractional CFO in this space. Fractional CMO, that would be like a strategist who comes in and maybe is part of your team, and they operate as that, marketing, wear that marketing hat in your leadership team. That's something that has been growing in this space as well. And so, let me go back. That you might find that person, with an hourly rate in the $300 to $500 an hour rate, or $2,000 to $10,000 a month, depending on the size of your business and what you need them to do. But it's fairly similar to what a fractional CFO might do, but from a marketing perspective.
And Matt, I think that our niche that we work with is digital agencies, and the rates you're showing are very much in line with what they do. The other benchmark that we give to those companies as a service-based business is that they should be spending between 10 and 15% of their annual revenue on sales and marketing activities. And we include, if you've got salaried people in there, or if the owner spends half their time, kind of the internal cost, as well as what you're paying external, and if you're paying for Google ads, kind of all those activities. So what we find with many of our clients is they're not spending nearly enough on that, yet when they want to invest, they tend to go way overboard. Like, I want to hire 2 full-time people, and you might look and say, okay, that's too much of your budget. We need to ease into it, or you better get a huge result if you really think that you can spend that much.
Yeah, that 10% number is is a really great spot to start from. It's easy. The other thing that I like to use is this frame of reference. A lot of firms grow through acquisition, and they'll pay 1.2x annual revenue to acquire another firm. So if you think about it, you'll buy a client for 1.2x client. But if you were going to do the same from marketing, would you pay 1.2x annual revenue of that client to acquire them through marketing? It's a way to think about it. Now, these numbers can feel really big sometimes, but if you start with that annual revenue, you multiply it by 1.2. I say divide it in half then, because really we're talking about you have to do sales and marketing. And so let's just say 50% is going to go to sales. And then we've got 50% for marketing. And then you multiply that by the number of new clients that you want to get. And then you divide that by 12 months. And now you've got a monthly marketing budget. So a simple example of that is if you've got, average engagement of $7,200 over the course of a year for a client, 1 times 1.2. We're accounting people. You guys like math, right? Divided in half for sales and marketing. Now, let's say we want 20 new clients this year. 86,000 is our marketing budget for the year. And then you divide that by 12 months and you've got your monthly marketing budget. Now, this should cover everything, right? We're talking salaries, technology, ad spend, agency fees. All of those things need to get covered in that budget. So I'm not saying you need to go out and spend $7,200 a month with a marketing agency. I'm just saying if you're looking at your internal budgeting, this is a way for you to think about it. When I start to share this with agency owners, it starts to make a little sense. Now, I love growth through marketing because you get to interview every client before you hire them or, before they come on board. Whereas with acquisitions, you kind of get what you get. You don't have that same opportunity. Some of them are going to be bad fits. Some of them are going to leave. So I would make an argument that marketing is a better way. It's messier on the front end for marketing, right? You don't know exactly what's going to work. It's less direct, but I find that it's cleaner on the back end. So if you think about an acquisition, a lot of times, hey, it's really straightforward. We just buy all these clients, but then you got to deal with everything, after you've acquired the other firm. It's complicated. You got to deal with people and clients and raising prices and all that. So if you think, those two, there's messiness. It's flipped in terms of where that happens between the two.
I think in what you're answering, one of our questions has around effectively measuring your ROI. Some of that, I think, Matt, in your example, you sort of answer by saying, well, if this is the outcome I want, you can measure against that and say, okay, did I get that kind of outcome is one of the ways, right?
Yeah. If you can come up with a reasonable cost of acquisition number for what it takes, and then you can judge your marketing against that. And I think that this goes back to a mindset thing. When you have a frame of reference and a good budget, you can say, hey, it's okay to spend $5,000 to acquire a client because I know they're going to stick around for 7 to 10 years and we're going to make that money back. But if your frame of reference is, I don't want to spend more than $500 per lead, there's not many options available to you, to be honest, at that level. And so it's likely you won't get the ROI that you want. You already mentioned this. So if you can't afford, this was an answer to the poll. Marketing's too expensive. We can't afford it. You got two options. One is a little snarky. You can lower your expectations and just not do marketing. And then you can also raise your prices. So if you can't hit that 10% starting point, this is kind of the other one, 10% of what your average monthly fee is. This is at least a place I tell people to start. Come up with a marketing budget that equals 10% of your fees. And then if you need to raise your prices by 10% in order to get a marketing budget, do that. That's the easiest way to do it. And if I can talk with you about how to raise your prices. If you need someone to help you write that email, I've got opinions about that as well. Other marketers can do that. Okay. This has been really great. I want to move through these last things pretty quick so we don't keep you here all day. I'm going to talk about some tips on how to maximize your marketing. So remember, everything costs time or money. And if you try to save money, it might cost you a lot of time. And so we're trying to make sure that balance is right. Tip number one, narrow your niche. the narrower your target market is, if you know that they go to conferences, they listen to certain podcasts, they are following different influencers.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much easier to do marketing for a narrow niche than it is for a generalist broad industry market. So that's tip number one. I know this is a big topic of conversation in accounting world. How do you choose a niche and how do you really focus on that? So there's lots of folks that have good information about that. But from a marketing perspective, it's great too. Limit your scope. What I mean by this is don't try to do everything. Try to do a few things well and start small and do a good job there. I would rather you invest more in the strategy and the messaging and getting your positioning right early on than try to jump in. You mentioned it, rather than jumping in and hiring 2 in-house marketers to do a bunch of stuff,
Does going along with that also starting with something that you can continue doing versus maybe jumping in and saying, I'm going to do podcast, blog post, this and that, and then after so much, you just stop and then do it again 6 months later? Would that be?
Yeah, and these two points overlap. Yes, consistency is more important than volume, right? You don't want to do a whole bunch of stuff in 1 month and then, or maybe you work on it really hard from September through December and don't do anything during tax season. Do invest where you can be consistent, and then with that, if you are creating things, look for opportunities where your marketing is able to be used in other channels. And so if you are going to expand your scope, if you're writing blog posts, how do you repurpose that for social media and email? Or if you're doing podcasts or, some YouTube videos, using that content and again, rather than trying to create something new for every platform. Be the face of your firm. This goes back to personal brand building. People like to connect with people. I know a lot of firm owners would rather just be out of the limelight. They don't want to be the face of their firm. They want to be able to sit back and have the firm kind of run on their own. I would rather firm owners get out of production, get out of the one-to-one client-facing work as much as possible, and become the one-to-many thought leader, subject matter expert, in that niche. You can really get a lot more out of your marketing if you're willing to be a part of that marketing process and you don't just outsource it to an agency or an in-house marketer. Tip number 5, be fine with good enough. This is kind of an interesting one. I think there are thresholds that you have to meet. You have to meet a design professionalism threshold with your brand and with your website and with your marketing material. But the difference between a $5,000 logo and branding package and a $50,000 logo and branding package, the amount that's going to make a difference for your actual firm is fairly limited, right? And so, like, if you hit that threshold, the rest is gravy. It'd be fine to have it, but you don't need to spend that much. The other thing with that is don't get too caught up with your personal preferences. Sometimes like better and different, right, are not the same thing. And so the way you want it or the way you'd prefer it is not always the best way to do it, or is not necessarily a better way to do it. And some firm owners really get caught up with the minutia that is not that important when it comes to how effective this is going to be, but it's really more about personal preference. And so sometimes you just need to let go of some of that and be okay with like pretty good. Okay. I'm thinking mostly from design is where this comes into play a lot. You don't want something bad, but good enough is good enough. Okay, number 6, work with a specialist instead of a generalist. This one is a little self-serving maybe. I think that people who know an industry tend to know what works in that industry. They also tend to be more expensive because they are a specialist. So as you niche into your industry as an accountant, there are also, there's a handful, I know of probably 3 or 4 really great accounting firm focused marketing companies out there. And so it might be worth talking to someone like that. All right. Those are my my tips. The last thing I'll just leave you with is if you spend too little, it can be very expensive. And this kind of goes back to those three buckets. If you don't spend adequately in these 3, or if you're not balanced in how you spend, it's kind of like if you, let's say you were trying to grow through acquisition and you went out and you paid a broker to go out and make really lowball offers year after year. You pay that broker fee every year, and they go out and they're saying, they're offering, 0.5x on that firm, and no one's selling. Like, they're never going to say yes to that, right?
Yeah.
But you still pay that broker fee year after year. That's kind of what it's like when you underinvest in marketing. You spend some money year after year, but you're not spending enough or in the right places to get it to the point where you're getting a good ROI.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
All right. Oh yeah. And if you don't budget properly, it can feel very expensive, right? And so this kind of goes back, get the mindset right, figure out how to budget for marketing, build it into your yearly plan, so that this is not money that feels like you have to come up with from somewhere else or that you have to pull out of your profits. It should be built into your business model.
Yeah, somewhat related to that, I have a client recently who wanted me to set up a budget for their people for kind of entertainment things. They felt like he was spending way too much.
Yeah.
And I said, based on what? And they didn't really have much to go by. And so we put together a budget and he was spending within that. The second part of the conversation was, if you don't feel like he's taking the right people out, like he's spending on his friends, that may be a different conversation.
Yep.
But let's say, okay, this does feel like a reasonable amount, and then hold him accountable within that kind of a budget. Okay, so Matt, we've got a couple questions. I've got, more beneficial to hire a fractional CMO or investing in marketing applications or software? Where do you land on that?
I mean, I would say invest in a strategist or a fractional CMO first. What I would say though is it's only worth, if you're thinking fractional CMO, you need to also give that person a budget to work with. So, don't spend $2,000 a month to have someone be your strategist and then say, you got to do this without a budget to actually do the labor and the distribution.
Okay.
But I would start there. Do that before you invest in the technology.
The application, the tools. Yep. I think you covered that piece before. That's good reinforcement. And let me end with the last one. I think you answered the other two. Any industry specific factors, and maybe I think for accounting firms, since that's your audience here, that makes marketing more expensive in certain sectors?
Yeah. The most important thing to know is if you have a niche, you have a national focus, right? You work with architects all over the country. And so you don't need to focus locally. And the way you're going to approach marketing is more in kind of like a shotgun approach to the whole country, because you're looking for very specific clients, but they can come from anywhere. If you are a generalist firm, your niche is your city. You are a local firm. There's no point in spending money trying to go after national companies if you haven't maximized your local focus first. And so you want to be accountant near me, business accountant in, South Jersey. That's your area of focus. And so that's where you need to start.
Excellent. And then actually the final poll question was, what was the most impactful tip? And narrow your niche was the highest answer in there, which is the most common thing I hear talking to other accounting firms. And it's sort of a, yes, I need to do that. So I think your emphasis around strategy is where that's done and seems really important.
Yeah. That. And if you're in that conversation, there are, accounting firm coaches and programs and things that are good at helping you narrow your niche. Where a marketing person can help you is once you've decided a direction, they can help you figure out, now, how do we translate that to the words on our website, to the brand that we have that's out there in the world? Because that's the next step, is now that you have chosen a new direction, you need to make sure that your branding, your marketing, all of that matches up with the niche that you've chosen.
Yeah. And the one thing I've been telling people recently is, for almost 10 years, our firm is focused a lot on the digital agencies. All of our marketing efforts really go toward that. It's a little bit more than half of our clients. And so when I have people say, well, I don't want to exclude all these people because I declare a niche, my response is, if you provide good service, others come to you and you can choose to work with them.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is the group we're going after. And so in general, I'm feeling like, no, it doesn't mean you can't work with any of these other people because you've said, this is my niche.
Yeah, I use, you've got your target, which is narrow. these are the people we're after. This is what our marketing says we're after. Yep. And then so target and market, which is the people we will work with. You can get referrals, other people will find you. And then you also have to have a line that says out of market. These are the people we will not work with. If you haven't defined who you won't work with, then you haven't really defined either of those other spaces either. I noticed Joseph in the chat mentioned narrowing the niche is so challenging.
Yes.
The bigger the firm, the harder it is to choose a niche. Big ships turn slowly over time. And so I totally understand that. There are ways to start in that direction. But so I would say start the turn now and look for some of those opportunities to at least narrow a little bit in the near term. And then maybe you can get to that really narrow niche eventually. But I empathize. It's a hard thing for older, bigger, established firms to do that. It can be a challenge. I get that.
I agree. Well, thank you. You saw a couple of the comments, I hope, that were just great job. And so very nice job. I agree with that. You do have your website on here. So if people want to get in contact with you, I assume that is the best place.
It's very simple. Marketingforaccountingfirms.com. You can remember that.
Excellent. And people will get the slides for that. So let's go ahead and get people out of here. So I've got a couple things to close with here. So thank you. We've gone through the questions that we have. So if you want to keep learning, I host the Modern CPA Success Show along with our co-founder, Adam Hale. Great topics for accountants, a lot of it, virtual CFO, tools, client activity. I mean, all sorts of things that we're looking in the accounting profession. If you want to be a little bit more active in that, we do have a Slack channel that people can join, the CFO community. So a great place for people, especially if you're looking in that kind of CFO world, to interact with people in there. And if you're really invested in the virtual CFO, we have a course that people can take. This is our playbook on the next slide that you'll see that it describes the course that we have. So 15 modules, but it comes with coaching and a weekly fireside chat. So if people are saying, I really want to go with the virtual CFO, we think we provide everything that would help someone get up and go. And finally, if you say, oh, that sounds cool, but why would I do it myself? Let me just join someone else. We are always looking for good people, and you can find us there. We've got the website on that address that people could check us out there. We will close with that. Matt, thank you very much. This was fantastic. People know how to find you for this. And I think people have got an idea that, yes, marketing is expensive and it's worth it when it's done correctly and led by a strategy.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, Tom. This was great. Folks can find me on LinkedIn or connect with me in other places. I'd love to hear. I can answer more questions too. I know there's some in the chat. Come find me and I'll answer those.
Sounds great. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.